Here are the BAFA rule changes for 2026. I'm Jim Briggs. I'm chair of both of the BAFA Rules Committee and also the IFAF Rules Committee. So uh, if you know anything about the process that we go through, we take rule changes each year proposed by NCAA, college football in the States. Then at IFAF level, we decide which of those it's necessary to adopt and add a few sometimes that people put forward. And then those rule changes are passed down to BAFA, and we have another go look to see whether there are any local variations we want to introduce. Now, the most important resource for all this is the BAFA rules website, which is currently hosted by BAFRA, but we hope to move it into the BAFA website system soon. That's rules.bafra.info, and there you'll find a lot of information, not only about the rule changes, the full rule book, but also guidance on various aspects of things, field marking, uniform requirements, medical requirements, all sorts of stuff like that can be found there. So here's a review of the state of the rules this year. So there are 10 uh, changes that we're making that we've inherited from NCAA. They made a few other changes, but they were mainly to equipment issues, so we haven't adopted those. This year, there were no IFAF specific changes introduced, and this year we've introduced 5 BAFA specific changes, which I'll talk about. Another innovation with the rulebook this year is for the first time we're including in it a section on rules application. Now, this is something that's actually existed for, I worked out today, 33 years in the officiating manual. And basically, it's about how to interpret and apply the rules. It works on the assumption that nobody goes to an American football match to watch the referees throw flags. So we only want to throw the flags that it's necessary to throw. That means that not every single technical instance of holding will be flagged. Now, we could leave that to officials' judgment, but as I said, 33 years ago, we decided we want to write down what a consistent standard was for this. And officials have been following that ever since. Now, this year, we decided that it would be good for the game if coaches and players could see that as well. So that section of the mechanics of the officiating mechanics manual is now replicated as the rules applications chapter in the rule book. So moving on to this year's changes, I think there's one change that, above all the others, is going to affect the game more. This is about the only change that you'll see in nearly every game that's played. And this is a change to the rule about injured players. So historically, if we've had an injury, the referee stops the clock. We have an injury timeout. The player gets taken to the sideline, and the game resumes. Now, in college football in the States, in recent years, there have been an increasing number of examples where coaches have been coaching players to actually go down injured to buy some time for their team. That might be to save time while they're progressing down the field towards a game winning score, or it might be from the defensive side of the ball to break up the momentum of the offense's series. And NCAA have been talking for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years, about how this is um, not something they want in the game. And they introduced a mechanism whereby um, instances of it could be reported to their supervisor of officials and dealt with. But this year they've made a rule change, which basically means that there's now no incentive for teams to feign an injury, because if an injured player is spotted after the um, team, after the ball has been spotted, then a team will be charged with a charged timeout. And of course, if they've used up all their charged timeouts, it'll be a delay of game penalty. So this isn't just a last 2 minutes of a half rule. This applies all the way through the game. It also applies to both teams equally. Now, what we're saying to officials about this is that, um, have a quick look around before you spot the ball to see whether anybody is injured. And if a player has been spotted by one official and another official is spotting the ball, we're going to regard that as an injury that was spotted before the ball was spotted. So we're going to try and reduce the number of times that teams get charged with a timeout. But I think it's also important for coaches and players to realize what the rule is. So you as coaches can teach your players what to do. And it may not be wise for them to start walking off the field and then decide to go down, because that means they might not be observed until after the ball is spotted. So it might be best for you just to tell players to go down immediately wherever they are if they are injured. We're going to talk to officials about this from a crew communication point of view, make sure that this is something that the crew checks with each other before a final decision is made about charging the timeout. And we've said that, if in doubt whether the injury was before or after the ball was spotted, it was before. But we'll see how it goes. But clearly, this is something that could be invoked in virtually every game. Second change this year is about disconcerting signals. And again, this is something that NCAA has been working on for a number of years and tweaking every year and adding some extra details and things like this. And the extra detail they've added this year is the bit that's underlined on this slide. So they've now reserved two words that only the defense can use. That's move and stem. At the same time, they reserved one noise that only the offense can use, and that's the clap. So now it's technically, at least, a foul if the offense uses the words move or stem, and if a defensive player claps his hands when the offense is lined up. Now, again, we're guiding officials on how to administer this, and if it's an innocent occurrence, then there'll probably be a warning. But obviously, towards the end of a half, if things are moving quickly, time to give a warning might not exist, and it might need to be penalised. And obviously, if a defensive player claps his hands and an offensive player moves in response to that, that's not going to be a false start on the offense. It's going to be a delay of game penalty on the defense. So we'll see how this goes. But again, it's something that coaches need to make players aware of. Related to this, and as part of this general move by NCAA to clean up action on the defensive side of the line of scrimmage before the snap, they've reworded the rules. So, what they clearly do not want is the defense to make movements that are purely designed to make the offense false start. Now, the restrictions only apply to defensive players who are within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage, so defensive linemen. It doesn't say whether they're in a 3 or 4 point stance or a 2 point stance. That doesn't matter. The only criteria is that they're within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. But they're not allowed to make abrupt or exaggerated moves that might simulate action. And again, if the offense reacts to that, the foul is going to be against the defense. Now, this is not designed to stop uh, defensive shifts. This is where the term stem comes from. A stem is where a defensive lineman moves position. So he moves, if he's nose up on the guard and he moves to nose up on the tackle, that's a change of position. It's also a change of position if he moves to the half point between the guard and tackle, because those are different defensive alignments. That's fine. But a player who starts off in one position, makes a move, and ends up in the same position hasn't stemmed. He's committed a foul. And as I say, if that draws the offense if that draws the offense into moving, that's going to be a defensive foul, not an offensive false start foul. NCAA also made a couple of changes about scrimmage kick formations. So, scrimmage kick formations are the formations you use in kicking situations, both punts and field goals. And basically, it's the rule that allows you to not have to have the requisite number of offensive linemen on the line of scrimmage at the snap. But for that requirement to have five players numbered 50 through 79 to go out the window, you have to meet the definition of a scrimmage kick formation, and that definition has changed. So probably the best way of showing this is by means of some diagrams. So here's a typical scrimmage kick formation. So we've got the snapper marked with an X and the holder marked with an H. So these players along here, five of them have to, it's no longer the case that five of them have to be numbered 50 through 79. Now, if we look at this formation where one of the wing backs has been moved into quarterback, once you did that in the past, immediately it was no longer a scrimmage kick formation. The difference this year is if you move that player somewhere, anywhere between the snapper and the holder, that was a scrimmage kick formation last year, but it's not a scrimmage kick formation this year. So I know there are one or two teams in Britain who don't have a long snapper and need someone to relay the ball back to the holder. But as the rule now is, that can't be a scrimmage kick formation. So you must still have five players on the line of scrimmage numbered 50 through 79. Okay. The other change to scrimmage kick formation is about protection for the snapper. So we know that normally in a kicking situation, the defense is not allowed to line up immediately over the snapper, and they're not allowed to contact the snapper directly for at least 1 second after the ball has been snapped. Now, they realized in the States that this was an advantage in this formation. So sometimes this is called the swinging gate formation, where your snapper is actually the man on the end of the line. Um, so it, uh, because he's on the end of the line, he may also be an eligible receiver. So now you've got an offensive advantage because you've got a receiver who can't have a defensive player lined up over him, nor be contacted for the first second after the snap. And in the States, they decided that was too much of an advantage. So the rule has been changed this year. So if the snapper is on the end of the line, then those two protections don't apply. So this red player was illegal last year, but this year it is legal to line up over a snapper who's on the end of the line of scrimmage and also to contact them within 1 second of the snap. Another change this year is to clarify um, um, whether this signal, whether a player in usually a punt returner, but it could also be a kickoff returner, if they spread their arms out wide, what does it mean? And I think different teams had slightly different meanings to it. Might have been a getaway signal, stay clear, either of me, stay clear of the ball, or whatever. But it was a bit confusing to the kicking team as to whether this was a fair catch signal or not. So they've just said, yes, it is a fair catch signal, but it is an invalid fair catch signal because to make a valid fair catch signal, you've got to get the ball, you've got to get your hand above your head and wave it from side to side. This is just sticking arms out. But they've decided that this is an invalid fair catch signal. So the defense can't advance the ball, but nor do they get the protection that they would normally get if they'd made a valid fair catch signal and made a valid fair catch. So hopefully, I don't think it's been a big issue in British American football, and I don't think it will be, but that's just there for everybody to know the rule. A couple of other rule changes that are not really significant, although they might appear to be at first sight. The first one is about roughing the passer. Now, this has gone through a number of changes over the years. When I first started officiating, you couldn't have roughing the passer until after the pass was thrown. So any contact on the quarterback before then was either not a foul or it was something else. But a few years ago, they brought in the restriction that hitting the quarterback below the knees before they'd thrown the pass was roughing the passer, as long as the quarterback was in what they call a passing posture. It, it means it's a fancy way of saying he looks like he's going to throw a pass at some point in the future. So they've now extended that protection to three other parts of the roughing the passer rule. One is targeting on the quarterback, but that would have been targeting a targeting foul anyway under the previous rules. Secondly, any forcible contact to the head or neck area that doesn't rise to the level of targeting, that's now roughing the passer, even if it happens before the pass is thrown. And then driving the quarterback into the ground and landing on them with, really punishing them by piling onto them. That can now happen before the pass is thrown as well. And that would result in a roughing the passer penalty, 15 yards from the previous spot, and an automatic first down for the offense. So it's just a bit more extra protection for quarterbacks. And then the final one on this slide is for a number of years, a number of fouls, if they're committed by the offense behind the line of scrimmage, Instead of being enforced from the spot of the foul, they were enforced from the previous spot, the line of scrimmage. And in that category, there was offensive holding, illegal use of hands, and personal fouls by the offence. To that list has now been added unsportsmanlike conduct. So, unsportsmanlike conduct by the offence behind the line of scrimmage is no longer a spot foul, it's now a previous spot foul, goes back to the line of scrimmage and enforced from there. Now, a couple of timing rule changes, which I'm pretty confident will not occur very often in British American football this season. So this one relates to timing changes in extra periods. Well, given that we don't have any potential for extra periods until we get into the playoffs, this isn't very likely to happen. But if you know the college overtime structure, you play up to two periods where each team has a turn at snapping the ball from the opponent's 25-yard line. So that's a new series, first and 10 from the 25 going in. And whoever's got the most points at the end of the series wins the game. Sorry, at the end of the period, wins the game. If it's still tied at the end of the first period, you do it all again in the second period. But for a few years now, if you had to go into a third period, the rule has been that instead of starting at the 25, first and 10, you now start at the 3-yard line and basically play an extra point. And so basically each team gets one snap per period. Now, it used to be that there was one timeout per team associated with each extra period. But what they're saying is that if you get to a third period, you get one timeout then, but it's got to last you until the end of the game. So you won't get a new one in a fourth period or a fifth period or whatever. And they've also tweaked the rules about radio and television timeouts. So once you get to the third period, basically the game isn't going to stop again. You just got to keep on going until somebody wins it. And then another rule change that was brought in to counter a tactic that a college coach, Division One college coach in the States, invented. He realized that if he put 12 defenders on the field, it gave his team a big advantage. And the worst that could happen was that he got a 5-yard penalty. But that play, when his 12 players were on the field, would use up some of the remaining time. And so it was worth it as a time-consuming tactic if you were defending a small lead at the end of the game. So NCAA has countered that by saying that if a team does that, no time will run off the clock. You restore the game clock to the time it was at the snap. Now, inevitably, in British games without stadium clocks, the time may be an approximation, because also the official who's keeping the time on their watch, you don't want them actually looking at the watch when you want them looking at the ball being snapped on the field. So it may be a bit of an approximation, but time will be restored and the defense won't get away with that as a time-wasting tactic. It does only apply if the 12 players participate in the play. If you've got 12 on the field simply because the 12th player hasn't got off the sideline fast enough, then the clock change doesn't kick in. So that's for the offense to decide whether otherwise it's for the offense to decide whether the time gets restored or not. So the five BAFA only changes, you've probably heard about some of them already. Um, the first one was simply to cover a gap in our rules. We didn't explicitly say anywhere that if you don't have a working chain and a working down box, that the game should stop and not proceed until they're fixed. And if they can't be fixed, the game would have to be abandoned. A couple of rules that BAFCA has been very influential in bringing in. So a mention here for Leiden and his work on this. So one is youth helmets are banned immediately. I think some people believed that youth helmets were designed for youth football. When in this country, youth football might be football including 16, 17, 18-year-olds. But in the States, they're talking about 8 and 9-year-olds. And anybody from that age up really ought to be wearing an adult helmet. So, given that all our competitions are above that age level, there should be no youth helmets allowed in British American football. And then the other one, we talked about bringing it in immediately, but we didn't think it was fair to make a change without giving people fair warning of it. And that's about people using elderly helmets, which we define to be those that are more than 10 years old, 10 years from new. We recommend people throw them away and do not use them now. From next year, that will be mandatory. A rule change that we didn't realize wasn't mandatory, but someone pointed out that up till now, washing and toilet facilities in the changing rooms for teams were optional. We don't think they should be. Good practice is to have them. And so that has now been defined as a mandatory requirement. And I understand the National League Competition Management are considering the possibility of applying fines to teams who persistently don't provide adequate facilities. We've had a rule for a number of years now that says that if there are two changing rooms, the home team has to offer the better one to the away team. This is tidying up the quality of changing facilities a bit more. And then finally, this is an advance notice of a rule that we're going to implement in 2 years' time in 2028 for self-officiated games where BAFRA can't cover a game with officials and coaches have to do it. We've recognised that there's a bit of a gap in our safety standards there because the coaches who do that have had no explicit training in officiating. They may have a rough idea of the rules, but they don't know what the best place is to stand and how to move and how to work together as a team in order to assure the highest possible standards of safety in the game. So over the next couple of years, BAFA is asking BAFRA and BAFCA to get together and produce a qualification that some form of certificate that coaches can take that will give them some extra competency in officiating. And it will be mandatory for people to have that for 2028 to be able to self-officiate a game. So hopefully that course will be prepared in time for hundreds of coaches to take it before the 2028 season starts. And if there are any Bucks coaches here, then this will apply to box games from October, November 2028. There are a few editorial changes to the rulebook. So we define an editorial change as something that's designed to make the rulebook clearer without actually changing what the call on the field would be in a given situation. So one of these is about inadvertent whistle. This is usually when an official blows their whistle and the ball actually isn't dead yet. So we allow play to carry on and usually award the ball to the team that ends up with the ball first after that. But we also realized that there are a number of situations in the rules where the something happening to the ball automatically makes the play dead without player involvement. One of those is that the ball touches something that shouldn't be on the field. You know, a dog runs onto the field and grabs the ball, something like that. That's the classic example. Um, or the ball becomes illegal. That's where the ball lands on a hedgehog and bursts. Or some player tosses the ball to an official and the official is daft enough to catch it. By rule, those all make the ball dead. And we're defining here that they don't constitute continuing action. So there's probably a case that is an exception to this, but usually in these situations, you will repeat the down. And we also clarified with respect to inadvertent whistles that any foul that occurs during that continuing action, those few seconds after the whistle is blown, should be treated as a live ball foul for penalty enforcement purposes. Because there's a big distinction in the rules between how you enforce a live ball foul and how you enforce a dead ball foul. But the players are still playing, at least some of them are. So we treat that as a live ball foul, even though technically the ball is dead. An editorial change from NCAA. For many years now, they've said if a player simulates firing a weapon, that is an unsportsmanlike act. To that, they've added the words brandishing, so firing or brandishing a weapon. Um, and I've seen videos from college football of players doing things pretending they're holding guns. I've seen them do things pretending they're holding swords or spears or things like that. But anything involving that is a specific unsportsmanlike act now. And then a clarification to the rule. I think everybody knows that, at least in a competitive game, you can't have more than one player for each jersey number. And it's actually an unsportsmanlike conduct foul on the coach if sometime during the game the officials discover that there are, in fact, two players on the same team wearing the same number. Somebody said to me, well, if you found two of them, surely that's two fouls. Two unsportsmanlike conduct fouls against the coach means he's disqualified. Well, that's not what the rule was intended to do. So we're just saying that as long as it's all found in the same dead ball period, they all count as one offence. If another pair of players are found later on in the game, then the coach is going to be in for it. But for the purposes of this rule, again, I don't know of any instance where it's been invoked in Britain. Officials who spotted it during the pre-game warm-ups would probably still as just tell the coach that one of the players' jerseys has to be changed and fix it that way without it ever becoming a game problem. But we need to have a way of handling it if it does crop up during a game. So that's it. That's the list of changes for British American football rules in 2026. Thank you very much for your attention.